Yes, welcome back to part 2 of our conference, the panel sessions. The first one is a panel where we're dealing with advertising, recent bans and future paths. You might all have seen that the discussion about advertising bans, partly in full or not at all, is something that has most recently gone over Europe almost everywhere. At least it's a discussion. Politicians take this topic and try to elaborate on it. Some regulators and legislators always have made decisions and conducted those conditions and implemented these bans in practice. We'll be dealing with it. We're doing this on a very international basis. I'd like to briefly introduce you to my panelists. As I said before, I do it very briefly because if you use your phone and scan the QR code on that blue thing on your table, you can click on the names. It's in blue font. You'll find every information needed. That saves me a lot of time. So starting with my very standard speaker, panelist, to my right, this is Vasiliki Panousi. It's not the first time we can welcome her here. She represents EGBA, the European Betting and Gaming Association. And Vasiliki is but joined by, now it's a challenge for me to pronounce this correctly, Katerina Papageorgiou, something like this. Papageorgiou would be the English pronunciation, but I'm trying to do my best. She's local, she's from Cyprus, a senior lawyer, legal consultant with extensive experience in corporate law, other related sectors, but also serving as an advisor to the gaming industry. And to my immediate right, from Amsterdam in Holland, it's my pleasure to again welcome Dr. Alan Littler from the leading gaming boutique firm in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, Kalff, Katz, Franssen. He has an extensive knowledge and experience also with the new licensing regime that appeared to be in place, I think in April 21 it was, yes, when they started granting first license or starting tenders, and also with respect to the challenges in the post-license period. It's easy to get a license, but it's not very easy to handle it and start the communication with regulators. To cut a long story short, we will start with the locals, always go with the locals, and we will be happy to listen to Katerina telling us which is, from your perspective, the current background in Cyprus about advertising and what are the challenges and the difficulties faced by the industry in Cyprus.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So the responsible authority in Cyprus for creating the advertising regulations and for monitoring the implementation of them, as you all know, is the National Betting Authority. The latter has launched quite strict regulations in the form of restrictions and limitations for the advertising section in an attempt to protect vulnerable individuals, the minors, and the potential for addiction. The Code of Advertising and the Practical Application Guide are the manuals of the marketing teams of the gambling operators in Cyprus, and they analyze the restrictions the operators need to adhere to. I'm not going to analyze neither those documents nor the actual restrictions, as all of us are familiar with them. So, with so many advertising restrictions and limitations in place, gambling operators encounter many difficulties to effectively promote their services and attract new players. Also, the fact that many of the regulations addressing the restrictions are quite vague put extra limitations on the advertising campaigns. In addition, the fact that all the ads shall be sent to the NBA for approval prior releasing is creating delays. For example, when there is a last-minute idea from the marketing teams of the regulators, of the operators, that came up after a new market trend or a new dynamic that unexpectedly arose to the market, and the momentum is crucial. Another difficulty that the gambling operators face is on the content of the programs that they may sponsor from time to time. Specifically, and in accordance with the Code of Advertising, the gambling operators shall have no direct or indirect role in the drafting of the content of a sponsored program. However, in practice, the operators receive complaints from time to time in regards to the content of the programs they are sponsoring. All these difficulties arise from the fact that the balance to be achieved by both the NBA and the gambling operators is very challenging. We need to safeguard players and society from gambling-related harm, while at the same time fostering and supporting a sustainable gambling industry. The ads are the main vehicle that needs to balance these quite contradicting aims. Consequently, we are of the opinion that that we shall altogether consider a new approach for the advertising sector. And this could be not the implementation of strict regulations, but on the contrary, the relaxation of the already imposed restrictions, the removal of the obligation of sending the marketing material to the NBA prior releasing, and the increase of awareness. We are glad that this is in line with the NBA Safer Gambling Strategy for 2022 to 2025, which adopts the notion of safer gambling instead of responsible gaming. So, safer gambling means that in addition to individual responsibility, it is also the responsibility of the state, its institutions, the gambling operators, and of all the stakeholders to ensure the external factors that can negatively impact people who gamble. Safer gambling is rooted in a public health approach which aims to reduce harms from gambling across society. Consequently, and I don't want to get to tire you, we repeat once again our proposal for relaxation of the imposed restrictions, the removal of the obligation of sending the marketing material to the NBA for approval prior releasing, and the increase of the awareness, and we would be very glad to see that implemented in the daily practice.
Right, so naming an issue, identifying it, is step one to solving it. So you had some ideas, but do you see any other suggestions how to improve the development of, let's say, communication, or, as you pointed out, the restrictions in advertising from the perspective of the industry? It's about why are we regulating? And if we restrict advertising, it's because we want to protect the players, but is every restriction good enough to serve this goal, or is it probably beyond what works? Mm-hmm. What is your anticipation of this?
Yes, so if you allow me, I will move to my second part of this presentation, where I'm planning to propose some ideas that we have from the practical aspect in order to improve the situation. So we believe that a lot has been already done, but a lot can be done for further improvement of this aspect. So, firstly, the gambling operators need to explore some more innovative marketing strategies that go beyond traditional advertising and that are consistent with the notion of safer gambling. Explaining now what we mean with the relaxation of the restrictions, it does not mean that we're going to have less regulations. Relaxation means that the regulations will continue to be in place, but additional to them, the NBA, for example, may create some further guidelines and templates that the marketing teams may consult from time to time. And also, the NBA will continue its monitoring role in order to identify any non-compliance with the existing regulations. In this way, both the gambling operators and the NBA will be benefited due to the fact that the NBA's workload will be reduced and the extra time that will be created will be allocated to other pending matters that need to be resolved and handled. And as Dr. Matthew Young presented earlier today, it seems that this is in line with the surveys that have already been conducted in regards to Cyprus case. We truly believe that awareness is the most important factor and the key factor for the case of the advertising. So awareness shall take two different paths. The one path is awareness for the general public, of course, while the second one is the targeted awareness for special categories that may face gambling issues and which may be revealed from researches that are being done, as the one Dr. Matthew Young mentioned before, and maybe for more specific researches. Also, Game Brain, which is an interactive program aiming awareness for students for the age 15 to 18, and which is an excellent initiative of the NBA, which was put on pause during the COVID-19 pandemic. We believe that shall be brought back into life. And now moving from the awareness aspect, we need to have also the suitable mechanisms for healing. We already have some in place that we need maybe to improve, and we need to create some more.
I think that's a good point. There's room for improvement. I think this is the dialogue that is needed among the stakeholders, regulators, industry, and politicians. Due to the fact that we're running out of time, I hope we could make this a bit shorter, and probably let's first hear the European perspective from Vasiliki. Representing EGBA means you personally serving for 7 years almost in public affairs, so you know what's going on across various jurisdictions. And what is your personal, I would say, assessment or impression of these advertising bans we are facing across Europe?
Thank you, Joerg, and hello also from my side. For this reason, I would like to show you a map, actually. It's not from EGBA, it's from Gambling Compliance, but still, it's very representative of the ongoing advertising regulations in Europe. So in this map, you can see Europe. It's also a test. Can you name the countries? But in dark blue are the countries where advertising is completely free. Then in red, you can see the countries where it's completely prohibited. And in between is those countries where it's partially prohibited. Now, this means that you can see the vast majority of member states apply heavy restrictions. So we can talk about watersheds, whistle-to-whistle bans, prohibition on bonuses, prohibitions on maybe certain gambling products, or prohibitions on advertising in certain media platforms. Maybe you're allowed to advertise on the radio, but not on television, for example. So we see that there is a tendency to apply more and more restrictions as the years go by. The reasons for that are mainly 2 or 3. Simply, most of the restriction claims are about linking advertising with problem gambling. So there are public claims that the more that someone is exposed to gambling advertising, the more likely it's possible for the player to develop problem gambling, which is a problematic statement because there is no evidence that link advertising and problem gambling, and it's very difficult to create such evidence because problem gambling is a very complex issue, and there are many factors that contribute to addiction, including also genetics, for example. This, however, does not mean that, for example, advertising should be distributed to self-excluded players or players who are at risk. We don't say that. Another reason for applying heavy restrictions is volume and saturation of gambling ads, which can indeed be very annoying. But instead of focusing on producing, let's say, many ads, putting many ads out there, it's advisable to focus on creating smarter content. And before I conclude, I would like also to say that while there is no clear evidence about the link of advertising and problem gambling, there is clear evidence about the impact of blanket bans to channeling. So, first of all, it's recognized by the European Court of Justice that if you want to achieve high channeling rates, you have to allow advertising because it plays a crucial role for this reason. And I'm bringing also some data with me, which I hardly remember from the top of my head. So here I have it. So in Italy, for example, there was a blanket ban that was applied in 2019. And since then, actually, ACOM, the communication regulator, commissioned a study, and there is proof that there was 50% increase in the worth of illegal operations, from 12 billion euros in 2019 to 18 billion euros in 2021. Sweden is another example. There was a drop of channeling rates from 83% in 2022 to 77% in 2023. And there was also an interesting recent study conducted by the Belgian authority, which showed that the survey was conducted for people between 18 and 30 years. And there, the Commission found that only 6 out of the 10 operators were the known licensed operators to young Belgians, which means that the 4 out of 10 were unlicensed. So you can see that even with strict bans and restrictions, young players can be still exposed to illegal gambling. So it's a factor to consider.
Thanks for your conclusion. It's interesting, and it's cross-border, and it says there's a variety of different measures. Alan, in the Netherlands, you have a little bit of everything, I guess, but you have something unique that nobody else has. It's a so-called ban on untarget advertising. First of all, I want you to explain to us what this means. And secondly, can we say this is almost same as like total advertising ban?
To answer the last question first, maybe.
Please.
You need to see. Yes, so as you mentioned in the introduction, the Dutch regime came into being on the 1st of April 2021. It's only 2 years ago this month that the first licensees entered the market for the very first time in the remote sphere. There were many conditions relating to the content of gambling advertisements, so it's not as if there was a free-for-all, but as Vasiliki pointed out, there was no control on the volume. So within a matter of weeks, there was a deluge of advertising on TV, and it would seem that the industry had forgotten that, including the state monopolists, by the way, that there was quite a large minority who was opposed to the reforms allowing for the licensing of remote gambling in the first place. So an awful lot of advertising on TV, many people irritated, questions were asked in Parliament within a matter of weeks, if not within the first month. And that then led to restrictions on advertising within the first, I think, 9 months of the regime being opened. And at the same time, we have the Gambling Authority, which undertakes regular monitoring reports, and they concluded fairly early on that young adults, so this is a specific category of players who receive additional protection within the regime. So these are players who are between the age of 18 and 23, so who haven't turned 24, and they were overrepresented in the population database, or in the number of players. So, for example, in this month's monitoring report from the Gambling Authority, in July 2023, so we're now talking 2 years later, more or less, the authority concluded that 21% of all active accounts in the Netherlands were held by young adults, whilst young adults only represent 9.4% of the overall population. And they concluded that they had an average monthly loss of €59 compared to the average monthly loss for all players of 132. So back when the figures came out about the overrepresentation of young adults, there was then a clamour for more restrictions on advertising. These are not at all evidence-based. Sorry for the researchers and scientists in the room. Basically, Parliament was saying we don't want to wait. We don't want to wait for the evaluation of the law, which is in 2024. We want to take action now. So then the ministry came up with the ban on untargeted advertising. So advertising for remote gambling, which cannot be targeted or where you cannot filter out specific categories of people, is prohibited. So it's no longer allowed to advertise on, signs about tram stops or train stations and so forth. And in the past, there were restrictions saying it cannot be within so many 100 meters of a school and things like that. So all of that has been prohibited. Online advertising is only permitted when the individual gives their consent to see the advertising, and the individual does not belong to a vulnerable group of persons. So a vulnerable group would include those who are addicted, those who are displaying excessive gambling behavior, and those who are young adults. If an individual falls within that group, you have to take, as a licensed operator or an affiliate on behalf of a licensed operator, the best available methods to exclude those people, plus exclude those who did not give consent. And then you have to be able to document month by month for each advertising campaign, regardless of the channel, whether it's social media, on an affiliate website, or elsewhere, that at least 95% of those who saw the advertising were over the age of 24. So that then created an awful lot of uncertainty within the sector. How on earth are we going to do that? How are we going to, A, exclude the categories of vulnerable people, because we won't always know? Or if somebody's going to an affiliate website, how would the affiliate website then know that somebody is subject to restrictions due to their excessive gambling behavior, particularly where perhaps that affiliate website is going to be advertising multiple licensed operators and not just one licensed operator? What we've seen is that affiliates have gone for age declarations, or you have to tick a box to say whether you're under 18, whether you're between 18 and 23, when presumably you'll have a version of the website with no advertising content. I don't know what an affiliate does then in reality. Or you have one for 24, those who are 24 plus, and there you will see the advertising content. But then the operator will need to report to the regulator to show that at least 95% of those who saw those adverts were 24 plus. And there has been an awful lot of discussion as to how that should be done. The bill, or the draft decree, the explanatory text of the decree, I should say, referred to the use of Google Analytics, but Google Analytics is not precise enough to measure this type of behavior, and it also includes an awful lot of unknowns. So players, whether Google cannot say this person is this age or that age, or any age at all, how do you calculate those people? Do you exclude them? Do you exclude them? And so we've seen the Gambling Authority in the past couple of months asking operators to report on various elements in light of this. And I think we're now in October, so I would imagine at the end of this year, perhaps the Gambling Authority will come out with more guidance on how operators should be fulfilling this requirement. So to come back to the question of whether it's a complete ban, I think it will depend on how strict the authority is going to interpret it. It's not a strict ban when you look at the decree, and that's not surprising because the role of advertising has always been recognized, but perhaps in its execution, it will be tantamount to a complete
It's not
ban.
much left for advertising.
No,
so what's the impact of this ban on the further development of the remote gambling industry in the Netherlands? And also, is there any illegal advertising which you cannot get rid of in your country?
There is some illegal advertising. The channelization rate, by the way, is apparently 92%. The objective was to reach 80% within 3 years. The Gambling Authority does take enforcement measures, cease and desist orders against affiliates advertising locally unlicensed offers. But indeed, the extent to which this ban, near complete ban, will have an impact upon the legal licensed remote market is somewhat unclear. I mean, there are operators who were in on day one. They've clearly built up, a presence on the market. There are those who are on the market prior to regulation under the horrible prioritization criteria, horrible word, not a horrible concept. They may have some residual brand recognition, but there are also newcomers to the market, and it's then difficult to see how they will get a foothold, especially given the fact that sponsorship agreements for sporting and non-sporting events will be phased out by 2024 and July 2025. So there will be really very little room if the regulator clamps down harshly on the actual enforcement.
Will there be some evaluation at some point, see where we are?
There will be an evaluation of the whole system in 2024.
Okay. So. I have a question that relates to this topic, as you said. Well, it's channelization. That's what it's all about. Advertising is providing information and, of course, generating new players, new traffic. And the mindful balance between these two goals is definitely what counts. The question is, would you consider that all strict regulations on the code of advertising and how operators are restricted on how they promote themselves in pushing players to illegal channels of gambling are current ways counterintuitive to what we all are trying to achieve? Maybe it's a question for you, looking the perspective of cross-border works from EGBA and various jurisdictions. Are we on the right way to channelize, or are we going into the wrong direction? Will this be successful? What do you think?
I think that if we want to achieve channeling, high channeling rates, advertising should be in the agenda. We have the evidence, we have data showing that it is important for people to know where they can bet safely. The real challenge is how to design a gambling ad in order to be responsible, and how to avoid examples of irresponsible ads. So making a gambling ad responsible and finding a balance on how to promote it and how much to promote it, I think it's the right way. And we have examples of responsible ads. We also have examples of irresponsible ads. For this reason, at EGBA, we drafted some years ago a code of conduct on responsible advertising. There you can see concrete steps on how to make an ad being responsible by focusing on content moderation rules. For example, there should be no claims that gambling can make you rich. There should be no claims that you don't need a job, or you don't need friends, or you don't need to have a social life, that gambling is important. Pressuring messages shall also be prohibited, that nobody should feel urged to gamble. Of course, minors, huge chapter. Advertising should not depict minors, but it should not also target minors. And how do we achieve that? First of all, you don't use comics, you don't use people that appeal to minors in your ads. But also, the use of technology can be a great way to avoid targeting minors. For example, on social media, there are AI tools there that can block the distribution of advertising to social media of minors. Something else that we included in our code of conduct for the very first time, actually, is age gating mechanism. So how the social media profiles and pages of gambling operators should be designed again in order to avoid minors accessing them. forward notices. So every time an adult wants to forward content that is related to gambling to somebody else, there should be a reminder. Please do not forward this message or this ad to someone that you know that is a minor. We have a chapter, for example, on sponsorship, how advertising and sponsorship should take place. And we also have a chapter on responsible gambling messages, that all ads should carry a responsible gambling message. There we have some problems with the typical message that you get when you see an ad on television, for example, very quick messages or very small letters. These are things that can be improved in order to make a
Can we find information on your EGBA website about code of conduct?
Yes, yes.
It's probably a good idea to make some research.
You can find information on the code, and you can find information also on the monitoring exercise that we conducted, and shows the results of compliance.
Right. Time is out, but I like to conclude with you, Katerina, because you started and said there is this need for communication among the stakeholders to improve things. Now we learned there are different ways and different sorts of the level of restrictions depending on the jurisdiction. But my conclusion is code of conduct is a good approach. Probably it didn't work in every jurisdiction because the government wants more. So the initiative should be that operators, researchers, therapists, politicians, and regulators sit together and talk. If evidence is available, even better. Is that what you would suggest for Cyprus as well?
Yes, basically, as a final comment, I would like to say that the aim of both the NBA as the regulator in Cyprus and the gambling operators is common. We are not in different pages. So the aim is to safeguard the players and the society from gambling-related harm, and at the same time to be able to have a sustainable gambling industry in Cyprus. So let's finish with a positive message that we shall all continue and keep up the good work. And for sure, we will be able next year here, maybe at the conference, to share some improved results from the common experience.
Happy to follow up. Best remark to close the panel. Thank you very much for your contributions.